Senator Marielle Smith.
Deputy President, I rise in support of the urgency motion moved by my colleague Senator Wong, and urgent it is. Deputy President, you don't put your hand up for public life unless you believe that when you get to a place like this, when you take a seat in a chamber like this, that your voice will matter, that your words will matter, that they will have influence, that they will have meaning, that they will have impact, that you can use those words to help lead our nation, to help lead your communities, to be a leader, to influence, to engage. And Deputy President, I truly believe that most people who put their hand up for a seat in this chamber or in the other place are trying to use their voice for good, who believe in the impact of their words, who believe in the impact that their words can have. But at the moment, in this place and in the other place, too many of our fellow senators aren't using their voice to lead, aren't using their influence to lead, but are undermining leadership, undermining what it means to be a good leader. We're at a point of time in our history where reliable information matters more than ever, where science matters more than ever, and where when you undermine science, you undermine good information, you undermine information which will keep people safe, which will keep them healthy, which could actually keep them alive. When you undermine that information, when you undermine that science, you put people at risk, and we must call it out. We must call it out in this chamber, we must call it out in public, we must use our voices to do that, to call out those who are seeking to undermine our response to this pandemic, to frighten, to incite fear, to spread misinformation. No one wanted this pandemic. No one was prepared for the devastation and destruction and it has caused, not just in Australia, but around our world. Around our world, the millions of lives lost, the families devastated, communities devastated, nations devastated, lives destroyed, livelihoods destroyed. And for too long, we were completely vulnerable to the devastation the pandemic was caused. But then entered science, then entered the incredible men and women who worked tirelessly around the clock to deliver a vaccine. And how lucky are we? How lucky are we to have science? How lucky are we to be the beneficiaries of their work? And notwithstanding the government's sloppy delivery of the vaccine rollout, how lucky are we now to have more ready access to a vaccine, which might just be the thing which saves our lives, which might just be the thing that protects our neighbour, that keeps our children safe. And to be able to do that, to be able to keep the people we love safe, that's a blessing and it's a miracle of science, and I am so grateful for it. I am double vaccinated. I am gratefully double vaccinated. Just like 77% of my fellow South Australians aged over 16 who rolled up their sleeves as well to get vaccinated, to keep our community safe. Deputy President, I put my hand up for public life to use my voice to lead in my community, to serve my community. But there are people in this place who are using their voice to spread toxic fear and misinformation which puts their fellow Australians at risk, encouraging misinformation that can turn to vaccine hesitancy. And we need to call it out. And not just those who are engaged in the explicit peddling of misinformation and disinformation, who are explicitly doing this to their fellow Australians, explicitly undermining our response to this pandemic, but those who are also dog-whistling, playing in word semantics, which seek to undermine this rollout, which seek to undermine our response. The consequences of this misinformation are real and they are personal. When they encourage vaccine hesitancy, when they create fear, they risk the health and well-being of not just individuals but communities. The consequences are real for the small business owners in my community who are already confused and stressed out about how to protect their staff, their customers and their clients, who think they know where their Prime Minister stands when he legitimises vaccine mandates on the one hand and then quietly, softly undermines them with the other. And they're real for those of us in this place for whom misinformation, disinformation is hitting close to home. They were real and personal for me when I found out that my vaccinated 102-year-old grandfather was having people not turn up to visit him because they thought the fact that he was vaccinated meant that they could catch COVID. He's 102 and he missed out on those visits because of that fear. It's absurd, but it's happening. It's happening because people let the misinformation happen, that they peddle it and encourage it, they stoke it. It's happening because misinformation has become a business model, an electoral model, and it is putting Australians at risk. Deputy President, my state of South Australia, we're about to open up. And whilst there is much to welcome in that, and I trust that those decisions have been taken on health advice, as we trust that the decisions throughout this pandemic are taken on health advice, and when they are, we support them. But I have to say I am deeply concerned for parts of my community who are at most risk, who potentially have the most to lose when and if COVID returns to our state. Populations like our First Nations South Australians, for whom the double vaccination rate is just 46.7%, dramatically lower than our whole of eligible population. And you know, we have seen particularly dangerous, particularly toxic spread of misinformation amongst our First Nations populations. And that, combined with a vacuum of appropriate public health messaging, has left people at risk. I want to commend my fellow senators, Senator Dodson and McCarthy, also Linda Burney, and all of those who have stepped up to call out this misinformation, have stepped up to keep these communities safe in the context of this fear-mongering. Because we have seen what happens when communities with significant First Nations populations become the site of a COVID-19 outbreak. We saw what happened in Wilcannia. Nothing short of a public health crisis. But we have these low rates in other parts of our country as well. We have them in South Australia. And it's not the fault of local populations. There were significant issues in terms of the rollout, in terms of the support provided to these communities, in terms of the public information and messaging. But they need our support now, and I'm worried. I'm also worried about the kids in our community who can't yet get a vaccination. I'm a mother of 2 children under the age of 5. And so when this misinformation spreads through our community, when vaccine hesitancy spreads throughout our community, it puts kids at risk too. It puts those who can't get a vaccine at risk. This is dangerous stuff. This is not coming to this place, to this building, using your voice to do good. It's not coming here to lead in our communities, to support your fellow South Australians. It's not coming here to stand up and say, hey, thank God for the miracle of science. Thank God for this blessing. Thank God we're not on the front line of this war, in this pandemic, alone now, without any armour. Thank God for science and scientists who have given us this vaccine, who have given us an opportunity to be safer. Millions of people have died worldwide, and I know there are countless people around the world who would love to have access to a vaccine and who can't. And here we do. Here we have this armour. So let's listen to the scientists. Let's listen to science. Let's value and appreciate this miracle and call out the people here and the people around our country who are using uncertainty and fear, turning it into a business model, turning it into an electoral model, saying, here's my shot of re-election, I'll stoke this fear, I'll stoke this fire, instead of leading their communities, instead of doing everything they can to uphold the health advice, to uphold science and scientists, to uphold the armour we now have in this war, in this pandemic. Call them out. It is grossly irresponsible. And it's not a game. It's not a game, it's not student politics. This is real lives, real communities, my community, our kids, our First Nations populations, our vulnerable populations who deserve so much more, who deserve leaders, who deserve people worthy of the chairs that they take up in this place. It's time to call them out.